I guess the simple answer is trying to fix it.
What should you be doing about it? First, everyone has to acknowledge that it actually is reality.
And that's not going to happen.
Well, almost everyone needs to acknowledge it. Enough critical mass to decide on changes.
Oh wow, there's so many different levels at that. I don't know really. It's just too complex a question.
Well, I think the motor cars, they'll just have to be electric. And as the technology is getting better and better, I think you'll find even trucks and trains will all be electric. They have to be throughout the world. We make plenty of electricity.
Look, I think we all know now it's got down to the general public that something has to be done. And when an issue gets down to the general public, it usually gets reflected in the sentiment and thinkings of the people that represent us in government. So I think now we're seeing more and more discussion. You know, it was a few years ago, say the Old Values Party and the Green Party, their warnings about what would happen were considered fringe. Now, for a long time, it's now mainstream.
I think it's a really difficult one. I don't know that there's easy one answer. I think it's probably easier for people in the sort of sophisticated world or the first world countries to do more about it than many of our poorer nations. But I think we should be assisting them as they grow and develop to make wiser choices or provide them with means of making wiser choices.
We've seen that there is a movement to reduce emissions. So I think all countries now are looking at that. It's a question of which country jumps first. New Zealand has certainly put its name forward in this area, but it's holding back with agriculture because it feels it doesn't want to jump first and lose the competitive advantage. But it will only take one dramatic climate change episode and it'll shake us all up. We're getting there.
I do think that some of the bigger powers, the bigger countries, really could do an awful lot more than what they are.
There's several things we should be doing.
It's a big issue and it takes everybody's input and everybody to make small concessions and probably big business to make big concessions.
I've just read an article in The Listener and it's by an English academic who has got a track record of looking into the future. And his prophecy over the next 30 years, the single most important issue facing the whole world is climate change.
To a degree, yes. It's kind of difficult in a two-party kind of preferred sort of a system to have any real impact, but it does clearly make a difference to the agendas that the parties have is important, and obviously there's been an increase in vote in Australia for parties like the Greens who have a social agenda as well as sort of the agenda to protect the environment. And I think that kind of a balance is important in all the decisions. You can't switch entirely to a green agenda for 100% of everything, unfortunately, from where we are now, but just to have that voice of conscience echoing in the back, in the ears of the parliamentarians is important.
And listen to our farmers, our rural people.
Yeah.
That's what we have to do.
To a degree, but there are many other things that need to have consideration as well. I think some people go completely overboard with climate change, especially the conservation people, I think, can take it too far, and because there are other things to consider in conservation than just what they feel is their little baby.
Well, that will depend once the different parties come out with their policies regarding that, and I think there's a few who are dragging the chain at the moment, but we'll see. I wouldn't put a yes or a no on that one at the moment.
All right, I'll take a very simple example. Logging is one example. You know, it gets stopped in one country because they want to protect their native forest, but they don't do a great deal about replacing it. They just import all of it from other countries. So how is that really helping climate change? It's not. It's just moving it from one spot to the other. So I can feel good, but we don't really care much about third world countries or that sort of thing.
No, I don't think so. That we all know, I think both parties know that this climate change is here.
We have to wait for their policies to come out. But it's certainly something I'd give a lot of thought to.
Labour has probably a more comprehensive, in New Zealand, more comprehensive stand on emissions than National. National are probably more pragmatic, seeing that they probably lean towards the farming lobby. So, yes, the ballot box is a powerful instrument if the cause is such that it outweighs all other causes. Look, it doesn't outweigh the economic cause. You know, people's people's financial situation and living standards usually outweigh just causes. But as I say, one further single catastrophic event could sway that and accelerate the decisions amongst those people that make those decisions, whether it's at a national level or an international level.
The other thing we haven't mentioned is that you also need governments and cooperation around the world, and it's probably not going to come from political parties in different countries. It's going to come from
Joe Blows.
Joe Blows or those people with influence that can make things happen and put pressure on governments.